of marginalization and exclusion. Immigrants experience a range of emotions in such encounters: outrage, anger, disbelief, disgruntlement, and even the wish to deny the racism. They ponder and fret over the meaning of such encounters and their implications for their lives and the lives of their children. They wonder how best to communicate the nature of such encounters to their children. Should they deny or ignore the implied racism? Or alternatively, should they challenge and dispute their hidden meanings? Encounters that deny equal respect to racialized immigrants rob them of their right to social citizenship in Canada. They come to feel that they do not belong to Canada. Immigrants are, however, not passive recipients or audience for these negative representations. They respond by creating meanings and presenting alternative images of their groups and therefore themselves. Memories that tell the stories of immigrants from their perspective are less well known. Fiction and poetry is one such medium, and we have a few established South Asian writers in Canada, like Shauna St. Baldwin, Rohinton Mistry, and M.J. Vasanji. Memory is interactive. It involves recognizing that those who tell a story can be understood by their audience as they struggle to represent an identity and a consciousness of themselves. As an immigrant, perceptions of women in India haunt me and make me feel vulnerable to the judgments of others about my nationality, culture, and therefore me. India is an integral part of me, and my skin coloring defines me in Canada as being Indian or of Indian descent. By way of contrast, in India, it is my residence in Canada that defines who I am and not my skin color. When I explain some aspect of India to white Canadians, I am not just talking about a country, but about my origins and cultural heritage. For me, conversations about India are not just about people there. They have implications for people here. What white Canadians know about India intersects with and influences their view of Indians there as well as here. The personal thus becomes political. The question that had been raised to me was difficult to answer anyways. The diversity of India's population, factors such as caste, class, sexuality, region, religion, education, urbanization, and their many intersections make it hard to come to any meaningful generalization about women in India. Similarly, Indian women in the diaspora have various social, sexual, and other identities. Besides, in answering the question, I wanted to raise the issue of power, how power constructs knowledge and influences what we know and how we know it. Would it be polite to speak about ethnocentrism to this group of interested senior citizens and ask them to reflect on why they believed Indian women were victimized? Did they also think that white Canadian women were victimized? Could I, in a few seconds, compel them to think, not only compel them to think about what was common and different among women living in varied circumstances and locations. I wondered if the audience thought that compared to the victimized Indian woman, I was emancipated and liberated, or perhaps they thought that my freedom was simply a privilege accorded to me by my residence in Canada. Stuart Hall notes that cultural identity is an act of production, an artifact waiting to be unearthed. Identity is a social construction that is a matter of becoming, but also being. It belongs to the future as much as to the past. It is not something that already exists, transcending place, time, history, and culture. Cultural identities come from somewhere, have histories, but like everything which is historical, they also undergo constant transformation. Far from being eternally fixed in some essentialized past, they are subject to the continuous play of history, culture, and power. The lecture and the question had made me, in the words of Homi Bhabha, a vernacular cosmopolitan who was translating between cultures, renegotiating traditions from a position where locality insists on its own terms. Cosmopolitanism can mean accepting the possibility that one's own culture is inadequate or fallible, or has not developed particular types of skill or human creativity. An acknowledgement of these shortcomings can prepare the individual to draw upon other cultures for a more satisfactory intellectual life. Such cosmopolitanism, however, is complicated because it can involve Orientalism, political correctness, and perspectives and interpretations that imply that there are insiders and outsiders. In the diaspora, immigrants create identities for themselves in many different ways. Immigrants, the second-generation children, whether born in Canada or elsewhere, and white Canadians have different interpretations and perspectives of India. These imagined Indias are a product of their socially constructed identities that are constituted by race, gender, ethnicity, and nation. Although the identities of immigrants and the second-generation children differ, they often share an ambivalence to the geographical, physical, emotional, and intellectual home. Cultural translation is a process that requires those who perform it to revise and rethink their knowledge, beliefs, and points of reference. Ambivalence and antagonism accompanies any act of cultural translation, because negotiating with the difference of the other reveals the racial insufficiency of sedimented, settled systems of meaning and signification. It demonstrates as well the inadequacy of those structures of feeling through which we experience our culture and authority and as being somehow natural and part of our national landscape. Given the time constraints of the lecture, I did not engage the audience in a prolonged conversation. I grinned and responded glibly by saying that women all over the world